Hi everyone. Why you feel alone around people, the truth no one talks about. There's a very specific kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being physically alone. It comes from being surrounded by people yet feeling completely unseen. You can sit in a room full of voices, laughter, and movement and still feel like you're standing behind an invisible wall that no one else noticed. It's a strange ache because on the outside, everything looks normal, but inside you feel a quiet emptiness that you can't explain to anyone. You watch people talk, connect, and share moments, and you wonder why your heart feels disconnected from all of it. It's not that you don't want to belong, you do deeply, but something inside you feels out of sync with the world around you. This kind of loneliness is soft, silent, and heavy, like carrying a weight no one else can see. It makes you question yourself, your worth, your place, even though nothing is actually wrong with you. Sometimes you smile, nod, and participate, but it feels like you're watching your own life from a distance. And if you've ever felt this way, you're not strange or broken. You're simply someone whose heart is craving a deeper kind of connection. A connection that feels real, safe, and meaningful. A connection that touches your soul, not just your social circle. And that longing is nothing to be ashamed of. It's a sign of emotional depth, not weakness. Sometimes you find yourself standing in the middle of a conversation, nodding along, smiling at the right moments, yet feeling like your heart is somewhere far away. You hear the words people say, but they don't land inside you. They just float around you like distant echoes. You watch everyone connect so effortlessly, and you wonder why it feels so hard for you to feel the same warmth they seem to share. It's not that you're uninterested or detached. It's that your soul is searching for something deeper than surface level exchanges. You crave conversations that feel alive, honest, and meaningful. The kind where you don't have to pretend or perform. But when the room is filled with noise instead of connection, you feel yourself slowly drifting inward, retreating into the quiet corners of your mind. You start observing instead of participating, listening instead of speaking, feeling instead of reacting. And in those moments, the loneliness becomes sharper. Not because you're alone, but because you're surrounded by people who don't truly see you. It's a strange kind of isolation, one that doesn't come from lack of company, but from lack of emotional resonance. And if you've ever felt this disconnect, know that it doesn't mean you're difficult or distant. It simply means your heart is wired for depth, not noise. And that is a rare and beautiful thing. You might be the kind of person who feels everything a little more intensely than others. And that sensitivity can make crowded spaces feel overwhelming instead of comforting. While others seem to blend into the noise with ease, you find yourself absorbing every emotion, every shift in tone, every unspoken tension in the room. It's like your heart has antennas that pick up signals no one else notices, and instead of feeling connected, you end up feeling drained. You sense when someone is pretending, when someone's distracted, when someone is only half present, and those subtle emotional gaps make you feel even more alone. You don't want to force conversations or fake enthusiasm because your soul craves authenticity, not performance. And when the energy around you feels shallow or rushed, you instinctively retreat into your inner world where things feel safer and more honest. People may think you're quiet, but inside you is a universe of thoughts, memories, and emotions swirling with depth. You feel deeply because you care deeply, and that caring makes you vulnerable in ways others don't always understand. Sometimes you wish you could switch off your sensitivity just to feel a little lighter, a little freer, a little less aware. But this depth, this ability to feel so much, is also what makes you compassionate, intuitive, and wise. You're not distant. You're discerning. And that is a rare kind of strength. You don't want small talk. Not because you he unfriendly, but because your heart longs for conversations that feel alive and meaningful. You want to talk about dreams, fears, memories, ideas, and the quiet truths that live beneath the surface of everyday life. When people stay on the surface, you feel yourself slowly drifting away, as if your soul is searching for a doorway into something deeper. You crave the kind of connection where words aren't rushed, where pauses aren't awkward, and where you can speak without filtering yourself. You want to feel understood, not just heard, valued, not just acknowledged. And when you don't find that depth, you start to feel like you're speaking a different emotional language than everyone around you. It's not that you expect people to be perfect, you just want them to be present. You want conversations that feel like warm light, not noise. You want moments where you can be honest without worrying about being judged or misunderstood. And when those moments are rare, loneliness settles in, even if you're surrounded by people. But this longing for depth is not a flaw. It's a sign of emotional maturity, of a heart that refuses to settle for anything less than real connection. Feeling alone around people often means you've quietly outgrown certain environments without even realizing it. Your soul is evolving, stretching, awakening, but the spaces you're in, and sometimes the people you're with, haven't grown in the same direction. You start to notice that conversations feel repetitive, interactions feel shallow, and the energy around you no longer matches the person you're becoming. It's like wearing clothes that used to fit perfectly, but now feel tight in all the wrong places. You don't feel comfortable, not because anything is wrong with the room, but because you've changed, and that change is not a loss. It's growth. Your heart is searching for places where it can breathe, where it can expand, where it can be fully itself without shrinking. You're not meant for noise or chaos. You're meant for depth, softness, and emotional honesty. And when you're surrounded by people who don't speak that language, loneliness becomes your quiet companion. But this loneliness is not a punishment. It's a sign that you're transitioning into a new chapter of your life. A chapter where you will eventually find people who match your depth, your pace, and your heart. Maybe you've learned to hide the deepest parts of yourself because somewhere along the way, you were made to feel like your emotions were too much or your silence was not enough. You might have been misunderstood so many times that you started keeping your real thoughts tucked safely inside, sharing only the pieces you felt were acceptable. People see your calm, but they don't see the storms you've weathered alone. They see your strength, but they don't see the moments when you held yourself together in the dark. You've become good at appearing composed, even when your heart feels heavy, because you've learned that not everyone knows how to hold the weight of your truth. And so you shrink your feelings, soften your voice, and hide your vulnerability behind a quiet smile. But this hiding creates a distance, not because you want to be distant, but because you're protecting the most tender parts of yourself. You feel alone around people because you're rarely showing the version of you that actually needs connection. You're showing the version that feels safe. And while that protects you, it also keeps others from truly knowing you. But none of this means you're broken. It simply means you've been strong for too long, and your heart is tired of carrying everything alone. You may feel alone around people because you've spent so much of your life being the strong one, the listener, the helper, the steady presence others rely on. You're the person who absorbs everyone's worries, comforts them through their storms, and holds space for their emotions, even when your own heart feels heavy. People come to you because you make them feel safe, but very few ever ask if you feel safe with them. You're so used to being the one who understands that you've forgotten what it feels like to be understood. And when you finally need someone to lean on, you hesitate, unsure of who could hold your heart with the same gentleness you offer to others. You've learned to carry your pain quietly, to smile through your exhaustion, to pretend you're fine even when you're breaking inside. This creates a loneliness that's hard to explain, A loneliness that comes from giving so much of yourself without receiving the same depth in return. It's not that people don't care. It's that they've grown accustomed to your strength and forgotten that you, too, are human. You feel invisible not because you are unseen, but because you've been too strong for too long. And your heart is tired. Tired of being the anchor. Tired of being the healer. Tired of being the one who always holds everything together. But this exhaustion is not a weakness. It's a sign that you deserve the same softness you give so freely to others. Sometimes loneliness comes from an emotional mismatch, from trying to connect with people who simply don't speak the same emotional language as you. You might be someone who feels deeply, thinks deeply, and loves deeply, while the people around you move through life on a lighter, faster wavelength. It's like trying to pour your heart into cups that can't hold the weight of what you feel. You share something meaningful, and they respond with something casual, leaving you feeling unheard and misunderstood. You try to open up, but the conversation slips back into small talk, and you feel yourself quietly closing again. It's not that they're bad people. They just don't know how to meet you where your soul lives. And so you start to feel like a visitor in your own relationships, present but not fully connected. You begin to wonder if maybe you're asking for too much, when in reality, you're simply asking for honesty, depth, and emotional presence. This mismatch creates a subtle ache, a loneliness that grows not from being alone, but from being unseen in the places where you most want to be understood. And the truth is, you deserve people who can meet you with the same depth you offer, people who don't just hear your words, but feel them. But here's the truth. There is absolutely nothing wrong with you for feeling this way. Your loneliness is not a flaw, not a failure, not a sign that you're difficult to love. It's simply a sign that your heart is longing for authenticity, for people who understand your silence as much as your words. You feel deeply because you were built to connect deeply, and that kind of heart cannot thrive on surface level interactions. You're not meant to fit into every room or blend into every crowd. Your soul is too intricate, too thoughtful, too emotionally rich for that. And when you don't find people who match that depth, your heart feels the emptiness immediately. But that emptiness is not a punishment. It's a compass pointing you toward the connections you truly deserve. It's your inner wisdom whispering, there is more for you than this. You're not asking for too much. You're asking for what is real. And one day, you will look back and realize that this loneliness was simply preparing you for the people who will finally understand the way your heart speaks. You feel alone around people because you're not meant for everyone. Your heart was never designed to connect with the whole world, only with the few who feel like home. There are people who will hear your words but never understand the meaning behind them. And there are others who will understand your silence without you needing to explain a thing. You're meant for the ones who don't. Just listen to your stories, but feel the emotions woven between your sentences. The ones who don't rush you, who don't judge your quietness, who don't mistake your depth for distance. You're meant for the souls who recognize the softness in you as strength, not weakness. And until you meet those people, every room will feel a little too loud, a little too bright, a little too far from the place where your heart feels safe. You're not meant to fit into every space. You're meant to find the spaces that fit you. The ones where your presence feels natural, where your thoughts feel welcomed, where your emotions feel understood. And when you finally meet those people, you'll realize that you were never too quiet or too sensitive. You were simply waiting for the right hearts to resonate with yours. The right people will make you feel seen without you having to try. And when that happens, the loneliness you feel now will make perfect sense. It was guiding you toward them all along. You might also feel alone around people because you've learned to read the room too well. So well that you often adjust yourself to make others comfortable. You soften your opinions, shrink your excitement, or hide your sadness just to keep the peace. You become who the moment needs, not who you truly are. And while this makes you adaptable, it also makes you invisible in ways that slowly wear down your spirit. You start to realize that people are connecting with the version of you that bends, not the version that breathes. They see the mask, not the soul behind it. And over Chimi, this creates a quiet ache, the ache of being known, but not truly known. You long for a space where you don't have to monitor your tone, your expressions, or your emotions. A space where you can simply exist without performing emotional gymnastics. And until you find that space, every interaction feels slightly off, slightly distant, slightly lonely. But this awareness is not a curse. It's your heart reminding you that you deserve relationships where you don't have to disappear to belong. You might also feel alone because you've learned to silence your needs, convincing yourself that wanting emotional closeness is somehow asking for too much. Maybe you grew up in environments where your feelings were dismissed, or where vulnerability was treated like a weakness instead of a doorway to connection. Over time, you learn to hold everything inside, telling yourself that you're strong enough to handle it alone. And while that strength has carried you through difficult seasons, it has also built walls around your heart that even you struggle to climb. You sit among people and feel the urge to open up, but the words get stuck somewhere between your chest and your throat. You want to be understood, but you're afraid of being misunderstood again. You want to be held emotionally, but you're afraid of being dropped. So you stay quiet, even when your heart is aching for someone to notice the softness you hide. This silence becomes a habit, and the habit becomes a barrier, and the barrier becomes a loneliness that feels heavier than it should. But none of this means you're incapable of connection. It simply means you've been protecting yourself for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to be emotionally safe. And you deserve that safety more than you realize. You may also feel alone around people because your mind is always observing, analyzing, and feeling things on a deeper level than most. While others move through conversations lightly, you notice the pauses, the shifts in energy, the unspoken emotions lingering beneath the surface. You sense when someone is distracted, when someone is pretending, when someone's smile doesn't reach their eyes. And all of this makes it hard for you to relax fully. Your intuition is sharp, almost too sharp at times. And instead of feeling connected, you end up feeling like an outsider, watching everything from a quiet distance. You're not trying to Your mind simply refuses to settle for the obvious. You want to understand people, not just interact with them. You want to feel the truth behind their words, not just the sound of them. And when you don't find that truth, you feel a subtle emptiness, as if something essential is missing from the moment. This depth of perception is a gift, but it can also make you feel like you're living on a different emotional frequency than everyone else. And until you meet people who can meet you on that frequency, loneliness becomes the space you retreat into, not because you want to, but because it feels more honest than pretending. You might also feel alone because you've reached a stage in your life where your soul is craving alignment more than acceptance. You no longer want to force connections, chase people, or squeeze yourself into spaces that don't feel right. You've outgrown the version of you that tried to belong everywhere, and now you're learning to belong only where your spirit feels at peace. This shift can feel isolating at first, because the world around you hasn't caught up with your inner transformation. You start noticing that certain conversations drain you, certain environments overwhelm you, and certain relationships no longer feel nourishing. It's not that you've become distant, it's that you've become more honest with yourself. You're learning to protect your energy, to honor your intuition, to listen to the quiet signals your heart has been whispering for years. And while this growth can create temporary loneliness, it's also clearing space for the connections that will truly resonate with who you're becoming. You're not losing people. You're losing versions of yourself that no longer fit. And in that shedding, you're making room for the kind of relationships that feel like home, not obligation. This loneliness is simply the bridge between who you were and who you're becoming. You might also feel alone because you've reached a point where your inner world has become richer than most of the conversations happening around you. Your thoughts have layers, your emotions have depth, and your reflections carry meaning that can't always be expressed in casual dialogue. While others talk about plans, trends, or surface level updates, your mind drifts toward purpose, growth, healing, and the quiet truths that shape who we are. You're not bored, you're simply craving something more nourishing, something that feeds your spirit instead of just filling the silence. And when you don't find that nourishment, you retreat into your inner world, where everything feels more honest and alive. People may mistake your quietness for disinterest, but in reality, you're listening, observing, and feeling everything more deeply than they realize. You're not detached. You heed discerning, choosing where to invest your emotional energy with intention. And until you find people who can meet you in that depth, you'll continue to feel slightly out of place, even in familiar rooms. But this inner richness is not a burden. It's a gift that will eventually draw the right people toward you. The ones who speak the same emotional language your soul has been whispering all along. You might also feel alone around people because you've reached a point where your peace matters more than your popularity. You no longer have the energy to entertain chaos, forced conversations, or relationships that drain more than they give. You've learned to value the quiet moments, the ones where your mind feels calm and your heart feels steady, more than the noise of being surrounded by the wrong people. And because of this, you've become more selective, more intentional, more protective of your inner world. This shift can make you feel isolated at first, because the circle around you becomes smaller, quieter, and more meaningful. But this is not loneliness in the painful sense. It's loneliness in the transformative sense, the kind that clears space for something better. You're learning that not everyone deserves access to your energy, your thoughts, or your heart. You're learning that solitude can be healing, not empty. And even though this stage feels unfamiliar, it's guiding you toward a life where your connections are rooted in truth, not convenience. You're not withdrawing, you're refining. And this refinement is shaping you into someone who will eventually attract relationships that feel peaceful, reciprocal, and deeply aligned with who you truly are. Sometimes the loneliness you feel isn't a sign that you're lost. It's a sign that you're growing. You're becoming someone who needs deeper conversations, softer spaces, and more genuine connections. And even if this season feels quiet, trust that it's leading you toward the people and places where your heart will finally feel at home.